Well, hello. We will wait a couple minutes and see if we can get some audience. You are live. We are building an audience. My long lost sister. In last names. Hello. Welcome. So, I'm curious how to start these things because, you kind of want to start off like big, right? Like, this is the big news. Oh! But the way this thing works is like people watch and then they like and then they kind of join in a little bit. So there's a little bit of bullshit fluff here at the beginning. Sorry. It is what it is. But I do want to start off with what I thought was the biggest story this week for this show. Oh, by the way, we have a website too. I'll tell you about the name of it all later and everything. This show is getting big time now, baby. Big time. Like, we've got a website. And an international audience, and some other weird stuff too. We'll get to that. But the big story this week was the global warming and the low amount of ice. I posted a story about this, and there was another chart. And I'm going to show and talk about this later. This is something I've been following for a long time. Like, the last few years have been, each one successively has been the hottest year in recorded human history, and the ice coverage chart this year just dropped, like the bottom dropped out of it, like boom, which is bad. And so the reason why that's bad is because a lot of the effects for this stuff tend to build upon one another, and ice in particular. You have to excuse my burpages. As the ice melts, it doesn't reflect as much light, so the ocean gets warmer, which is why you see these big drop-offs so quick. So this will be a curious story. Now, this was, I thought, the biggest story, but it wasn't, of course, what everyone was talking about. And what's curious about that, this kind of feeds into the other big stuff this week, is that NASA apparently is no longer going to be in the whole climate thing. They're going to go explore the universe. And they'll come back and be like, what happened to all you people? Like, do you remember, like, the whole global warming thing? We're all gone now. Anyway, but yeah, that's actually one of the things that Drumpf has talked about, is his advisor for NASA wants to not talk about the politicized science of global warming, even as we see this stuff just start to just go nuts with the ice. So we'll follow this one, and I'll follow up on it. Like I said, I've been following this story for years and years and years, and the chart this winter is crazy. Like, it was like, so they're talking about, so it's so warm in the Arctic, like, and it's night there now, I think, right? So now it's supposed to be getting tons and tons of ice, but it's so warm that the ice was still melting at night. Oops. So that, we'll see how that works. So that goes into some of the next. So we've got to talk about the tweets and this stuff. Apparently, this guy's not going to stop tweeting, and he's not going to stop tweeting ridiculous things. That's bad. So, like, today, I was going to talk about kind of the fake news stuff and one of the fake news stories. So, and I'll talk about this later, but one of the reasons why the new map of Louisiana is terrifying, not about, I know, I don't, that's the thing with Louisiana, and and same with Florida too, and I wonder if this is going to be the year that Florida just gets totally, just ridiculously hammered. They already have the big floods whenever they have a really high tide. It's just kind of, they flood automatically. So who knows what he's going to blame it on. So like I said, like, the insanity today with the tweeting stuff. So, and this is one of the things where the fake news is, this is where it comes up and why they do this stuff. And Breitbart does this stuff all the time, where they'll put in a story to counteract like what, that mainstream media thing that's going around, like the story now, and this is the big thing, of course, that Hillary's lead in the popular vote keeps growing. And this is largely because California is the biggest state, excuse me. And is also very slow to count their votes, and also has a we want to count all the votes philosophy. And so everybody does that and all the overseas stuff. So anyway, her vote lead keeps growing. And so one of the news stories that they put out, one of the fake news stories that came out to talk about this, Alaska, yeah, is that Alaska for the global warming stuff about how hot it is? Alaska is a state. You have to give me some context there, Renee. Sorry, but so he tweeted today about so this was a story that came out, and I actually had seen this a while back, right? So Hillary's lead in the popular vote keeps growing. It's over 2 million votes. So Breitbart a while back, like a couple weeks ago, like right after the election, Trump wins Heartland by 7.5 million votes, right? Like just ignoring the whole popular vote and doing this. And actually, Breitbart, this is the kind of stuff they do all the time to counteract like the mainstream media kind of zeitgeist stories. And one of the ones that came up was this one about there was these 3 million illegal votes cast by undocumented immigrants. Let me talk about this for a moment real quick, because the idea that there are biggest but not by population. Yes, California is the biggest by population. So the idea here is that there were 3 million extra undocumented people voting. So this raises a number of questions, right? So Trump is tweeting about that there were millions of fake votes in an election he won. Like, why? You won. You don't want to say that it's fake, that all these fake people voted, because of course his assumption, right? His assumption, exactly, Renee, that's what we're talking about. His assumption is that all of these people illegally voted against him. Now, I want to step back and think for a moment, right? Like, things go to hell in the U.S. You move to some other country, right? Like France or something like that, right? You move to France, right? Because you're sick of the U.S. But you move there illegally because, you couldn't go there straight because all the Americans. So you sneak into the country, and somehow you've set up in France, and you're there, you've snuck in, and you've got a job somehow, and then an election comes up. And you remember, you're in the country illegally, and you're going to go to a government building and impersonate a citizen in order to vote in that French election because you just care so much about democracy, and you have... The idea that undocumented people are voting at all is ridiculous. Why would you risk everything, your entire life, everything, just to go and vote for something? I mean, I love voting. I think it's very important, but it's not something that if I was someplace illegally, I would expose myself to the government directly, commit an additional felony in order to have my little say in the way democracy. So the idea that there are undocumented people voting much at all, that they have any motivation to vote, is absurd. And the idea that they did so in millions in this last election, ridiculous. And the idea that they did so all for Clinton, and then the brain explodes because this is just so stupid. And this is what he tweeted today. So you're left to wonder, like, how do we go from there? I mean, how do you... So... I mean, he's ridiculous. He's this narcissist that's going to be in power, and the fallout from that, I think, is going to continue. Who knows what's going to happen with that? It's even more absurd to think that they would vote for Trump. Yeah, well, it happened. I think a lot of people didn't understand exactly what was going to happen. There's a lot of very little respect for, I think, the way things actually work. And you'll see this, actually. I'm going to go ahead and move on a little bit, but the stuff about the voting tweets, this is just this craziness. I mean, he's so thin-skinned. This is going to lead to really bad places when he can't convince everyone that he's right? When like the polls come out and he's at 70% of the population is like, you're a fucking buffoon. which he is, right? I mean, but they're going to try and claim that he's not, and that the media is lying to you, and blah 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 blah. It'll be interesting to see how they try and turn this around, because they have to again destroy the media in order to try and make this guy look good, in order to build what Bannon wants to do. It's just his white nationalist paradise. So this brings us to one of the next things I want to talk about. And there's a couple things that are going to happen. Excuse me. I don't know, can you hear that ice crunching? Sorry. Horrible habit, but and it destroys my teeth. You see, that's how I got this gap. It was a really big piece of ice. Just, so, you guys remember Amway? Like, Amway? I did, like, one of the first multi-level marketing things, and so, apparently, the person who was, I guess, one of the heirs to that fortune is going to be the new Secretary of Education. She's a big believer in school choice and vouchers, which I don't know if you're familiar with this. There's public education on the one side, and then vouchers and school choice on the other, and they're two different things. There is not a voucher approach to public education. There's public education. You either believe in public education, and then you got this other thing over here, which is this. I hate to see what's going to happen here with the degree they can mess up schools. I don't actually know, and I'm not a perfect knowledge kind of person on that. I am not a fan at all of vouchers and the idea of charter schools. The idea is to avoid the big costs of education, right? Avoid the planning and building a school and investing in teachers, and then you're like, oh well, we'll just use that building over there, and you know how to teach this. You just read those things, and it's just it to me is someone who again. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I mean, one of the reasons I'm talking to you folks is because I'm a philosopher, right? I'm a lover of knowledge and wisdom, and I hate seeing this bastardization of public education. The public education is, like I just posted this graphic earlier today, is the foundation of our democracy, and we have to have everyone educated to a certain degree for this to work, to know that this is bullshit, and no, the Pope didn't actually endorse Trump. This is how you know that this stuff is bullshit, and this is going to be so hard, and this is kind of that looking, 10, 20, 30 years down the road for this world that my children will inherit and that I'm going to leave, and public education, I think, should be part of the foundation of this country. Everyone who is here, citizen or no, should be absolutely entitled to a quality public education. There's no question about that. And the way that we do that is first dedicate ourselves to everyone getting that, and then figuring out the way to do it. What the voucher thing does is it just really makes us every man for themselves, every kid for themselves. And just this, where there's these kids who just, like, who's watching out for them? Oh, well, shit happened to their family. Well, I guess they're fucked for life then. Where does this come in now? The falling through the cracks and that kind of stuff, and then as a society, that comes back. These people don't disappear, but I'm really afraid that the kind of people who are talking now to our president think you can just make them disappear and think you can just drive them away. So, and speaking of vouchers, right? And so you also have the Republicans in Congress, right? And so what they are now going to do is the Ryan plan. This is by request to talk about what the Republicans are going to do in Congress and the Ryan plan. But this is changing Medicare to a voucher system. The basic details are everyone who's 55 and older, I think is the way it was a couple years ago, gets to keep current Medicare, whereas just reading, sorry. Reading and talking at the same time. I can do that. No, not really. but the Ryan plan for Medicare is a voucher system, and that's the idea. Is then they set out these vouchers that then aren't indexed to Medicare inflation, and then you just get that much, and you go shop for your care right as the point you get to be really old and sick. It's really like just a horrible idea, and that's another horrible idea upon horrible idea implemented by buffoons. So this brings me, and this kind of might be a little bit of the boring part. So this all video and some of this other stuff that I'll be doing, I want to help us avoid the apocalypse. And that's kind of like the motivation here, right? I know it's kind of silly and ridiculous, but there's, throughout history, certain patterns have shown up, and we're walking down a really bad road. And this is kind of something that I've been, going on this entire century. I've been working on this thesis, which is true, going back to 2000 and what happened there, and the kind of collapse of empire and how that works, and the notion of the U.S. being one of the few cultures left, one of the major cultures that's still pre-apocalyptic, which is to say you can't point to an apocalypse that's happened, whereas pretty much everybody else in the world has that whole, oh man, we lost and just got our asses kicked and everything was destroyed moment. And we haven't yet. I want to avoid that, and I think there are ways to avoid that, but I don't think that having a buffoon in charge this is the right. So anyway, that's part of the whole point of the title for the website where I'm doing a lot of this stuff. It's called Escaping Dystopia. And here's actually a quote. It says, "Countries don't really recover from being taken over by unstable authoritarian nationalists of any political bent." And in this case, you have one of no particular political bent, of merely just an unstable authoritarian nationalist. So to the degree that things are going to get screwed up is a question of when and how much. And so that's the idea behind the media effort that I'm doing, is to try and at least get something out there that says, guys, come on. Please stop being so dumb. So, something like that. And I hope it's slightly more nuanced than that. One of the ways, and I actually had a link about this, and I'll throw this up in the links for this week, is how dystopias come about. And what I mean by dystopia real quick, let me do a quick definition read for you. It says, an imagined place or state in which everything is unpleasant or bad. Typically a totalitarian or environmentally degraded one. Just a place where just everything sucks. And the video about it's how to recognize a dystopia really talks about what happens to lead to those. And it's pretty much always somebody's got a plan to make things great and perfect, either in the first place or again. And it is through that effort to perfect that it ends up making things horrible for everyone, or dang near everyone, except a small elite that ends up liking things quite a bit. So the idea is to avoid that. And by finding actions we can take and information to share and what to do to avoid that reality. Caw-caw, caw-caw. How do you make a mockingjay sound? But I think there is one, isn't there? I think I can do something like that. But where did my outline go? There we go. Back. So part of why I want to do this a little bit, and why I think I can, is my education, and I'll talk about this a little bit. I actually have a degree in mass communication. It's not what I do for a living, but this is what I studied and learned, and I think this is important to understand nowadays. I was going to talk about this a little bit, about our media and how it shapes the world that we think. And I'm going to do this more in a specific episode and talk about that in a little bit more. Hold on just a moment. Decisions we're making right now, when extrapolated over decades, do make a difference. Small changes now can keep us from the apocalypse you speak of, but change is hard. Yeah, I know. Change is definitely hard. And always in myself, that's one of the things that why I was just going to talk about. I don't try to just tell people what to do. I try to do it and then be like, hey, this is what worked for me, or this is how I think we can do it. And so I try to break things down to a level that for me finally becomes true and real. And this is where kind of this comes to my own kind of philosophy stuff, and we're going to talk about this for a few minutes. And I actually, this is, by the way, this is the whole arrival thing I was talking about earlier before, and see that, by the way. It'll probably be out on video. I'm going to give the whole reveal on this probably by the end of the year. But, excuse me. I do. I'm very gaseous. You guys can't even hear me farting, but it's constant. Oh, it smells so bad in here. Anyway, so I was talking about my whole philosophy about how I was going to save the world. But no, the idea behind it, and again, this is like a whole concept on how to analyze and deal with information. The notion and concepts of information and how they work and how we process it. And the very idea of an idea and a concept. There's a philosopher who wrote about this a little bit, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he wrote this book about the concept and the notion of an idea itself. And that's what is at the core of this, my philosophy, the model, as I call it, which I'll get into and talk a little bit. So, about me, and this is my next thing, and I said this something after the 2004 election, which, again, was just so heartbreaking and wrenching. Again, Bush lied to the world. They've got weapons. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. Oh, let's cut taxes and go to war. Oh, you're a genius. Oh, it's going to end in failure. You guys are idiots. Don't. He wins. All right. So this has happened. I have some familiarity with the whole country making this idiotic, foolish decision that ends in disaster. Again, you can't do that too many times before it really, really ends in disaster. For those who have made personal decisions that have ended in disaster, but you've survived, you realize that, hey, maybe I should stop doing that kind of stuff. But after 2004, one of the things that I talked about or thought was that the left of this country needs to learn to speak of God and the notion and about it. And there's a lot of people on the left, and this is where I get a little odd, who are of the atheist bent. They are very much that God is not a thing that exists and has no influence, should have no influence on public life and act like it doesn't. And then on the right, you have very much, Jesus drives everything that I do and informs every decision. And there's a mix in between of those a little bit, but I am a little bit different in that because, again, on this side, see, I like using my hands, they help. So this right side, which is your left, welcome to Mirror World, they speak of God easily. They usually have more of a deist is the general background, and then on the other side you have the atheist background, and then this guy here in the middle, I'm what's called a pantheist. And my notion and concept of God is slightly different than this one over here. And because I have one, it's different than this group over here. And I'll talk about this a little bit more and explain it. It's an interesting concept, but I was at a meeting with the Democratic Party, and there's a word for this concept, and the word is numinous. It says having a strong religious or spiritual quality, indicating or suggesting the presence of a divinity. And it's this feeling of oneness and being. And I was at the meeting this last Thursday, and they were talking about the notion of so if something happens, right, and they decide to set up that registry that he's talked about. And the speaker said, if this happens, I'm going to sign up, and I suggest you should too. And I looked around, and there were nods, right, all around the room, And that feeling, right, of connectedness, and you get it, and I get, like the hairs kind of stand up on my arms, and that kind of like sense of, being, and that is that feeling, that numinous feeling of God in the notion. Anybody who's been in like religious ceremonies and whatnot knows about that kind of stuff. So this goes a little bit into some of the philosophy that I talk about, and the notions of what that word means and how to do it. The important part here, I guess, is my politics and all this stuff that I talk about from that side flows from the philosophy, not the other way around. So the philosophy came first, and then this way to analyze and understand information. Sup, Nita? And then after that came, all right, now let's go look out into the world, see what's going on, and then what do I agree with, right, from this notion that I've already established on how to look at and deal with information and apply it. And so that's where I ended up a little bit on the left here in the U.S., but it came from that philosophy first, and then moving on. Speaking of which, now in that kind of pantheist notion and philosophy, when you speak of people, and this is a little bit abstract, shall we say, and I speak of this a little bit sometimes, the concept and the notion of being like conscious light, essentially, that we are life, right, matter that has evolved, the matter being created out of energy in these big stars, right, with the denser matter being created in even larger explosions, eventually being organized to the point where it can learn how to organize itself, and then we call it life. And it has to fight to continue to stay alive. But, excuse me. We are essentially that kind of conscious light. One of the things that we know about the way that light works, and this is where we go back to this concept of the electorate. And now I'm applying that philosophy that I was just talking about to the real world. And this is what I call Schrodinger's electorate. And for those of you not familiar with Schrodinger's cat, it's essentially a concept from a lot of the, I want to say, what is it, quantum physics, but it's basically on the rate of decay, right? You have a half-life for, yes, the Tao of physics. I'm actually familiar with a lot of those books, and I have read a lot of those. The concept, this is actually... to get it from a philosophical angle, I don't have for my philosophy, there's no metaphysics, right? We don't need this concept of made-up things. We have our actual physics that actually explains so much of what we already understand that we don't even need a metaphysics. We have a physics to do that, and then it's then understanding and translating that back and then looking at it. But here, talking about Schrodinger's electorate, so when you're looking at the rate of decay for a particular particle, you don't know which particles are going to decay, only that some will to a certain percentage. This is where the whole Schrodinger's cat came in. And it actually, I'm mixing some metaphors when I talk about this, because it's actually should be Heisenberg's electorate. And I can't even talk about Heisenberg now because of Breaking Bad. And like, oh, he's doing the meth thing. No, it's actually an uncertainty principle that has to do with measuring light. And the idea here and the problem, and this is the Schrodinger's electorate being, you can't know if the cat, I don't know if you guys know this, I'm just being so wacky on my whole explanation of this, assuming that you know about these physics metaphors. But essentially what we have now is an electorate that knows it's being watched. And because it's being watched and knows that it's being watched, it's not going to respond the same way that it would if it wasn't and it didn't know that. And this is why I think some of the polling was off, and I think you're going to see in the future additional polling that's wildly off, because people know that they're being watched. And they know that they can confuse the watchers, shall we say. And I think that's going to continue. Let me step back for a second, and then I want to take a break and get a drink, because I'm being boring. And that kind of sidelined a little bit, which I thought it might, which is fine. Again, I just wanted to talk to you guys about this stuff. But now we're going to go back to media and the real world discussion, and not so much the philosophical stuff, which can be a little bit abstract. The fake news discussion. So, again, like we saw today, the president-elect of the United States retweeted fake news that millions of undocumented people had voted in the election. This came from one tweet from a guy who said this, and he had like, oh, I've got this website, and he did that, and then it got picked up by another website, and they said that, and then they get the abstract, and then it goes, and then it goes, and then it goes, and then it goes, and it goes. And this is exactly how the fake news stuff spreads so quickly and so bullshitty. There's no track back to it. There's nobody who's ultimately responsible, because it's always, oh, they said this. Oh, I'm just saying what they said over there. Oh, this person just said that. Like in this case, and I had the links on it earlier, back to the PolitiFact article that says, oh, no, we tracked it back to this guy who was claiming this. We called him, said, hey, can you document these 3 million people that you're claiming voted that are undocumented? Like, nothing, no response. So you have that kind of fake news, right? And so, but there's so many different kinds of fake news, and people don't even know what to call fake anymore, right? So they had this discussion with the New York Times, speaking to the president-elect, right? Lots of people are saying, like, and they were saying, oh, well, about the fake news discussion, and then Trump was like, oh, yeah, well, CNN was all fake news the whole time, and that's not fake news. Like, fake news is like people just straight up making up fake stuff. That's what fake news is. And like I posted about the tabloids and the Russian stuff too. Now, here's the other thing that's happened. Remember how earlier I had the 3 million people, and they had that as a antidote news story to Hillary winning, right? She won by 2 million, but 3 million of those were fake. And then, now they've got, there's the fake news stuff, and here's a way to look at it. Excuse me. But then one of the websites mentions the Drudge Report as one of those websites that links to these fake news, because it's, they're linking to it. They're not selling it per se. It's just, hey, check out this story. Hey, check out that story. And some of those stories they link to are fake. But now, because they're tied into it, and this Washington Post story is mentioning this other website that mentions them, now they're using that to discredit this story about the fake news. And so this is how there's this constant tearing down of the media, so people don't know which one is true over here, or which one is true over there. And at the same time, we've had the convergence, right, of our media platforms, where it's all through your phone or just through a screen or through a browser. It's all at the same newsstand, right? All these crazy things are all right next to each other, right, and all linked. And then now the algorithms, right, that start to push up things look only at, who's looking at all this stuff. So when you kind of democratize this bullshit just starts to blow up. And one of the things that you've seen here is that there's a very partisan slant to the bullshit that blows up, because people who are more fact-based want to have this, scientific reality thing, don't push on these bullshit stories, whereas those who are like, oh my god, I do believe that baby is dead and that Hillary killed it because she wanted the blood, and like there was like this thing about this blood libel and stuff and all sorts of crazy stuff that I don't know. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I know, that's what people always say when they're making fun of me. It's all good. But so this just the news discussion, and then you have like stuff like Drudge Report and Zero Hedge, and even like Alex Jones. Like that's the question, right? Does one consider Alex Jones to be real news? And of course I say no, of course not. That's we need another word for it or something to be able to deal with this stuff. I absolutely think we need another word, because it's not really. No, I know, Kevin. I'm saying that. I appreciate it. The passion comes from, I don't know if you saw earlier, but it comes directly from the philosophy and the stuff that got to talk about it. Because there's a chance I think we can avoid the apocalypse. So then it becomes my effort becomes just versus that. What's the big deal? And I get to have fun and talk to people about stuff. Ooh, and I get to talk about something else that's really neat. I think I covered a lot of this, but we'll talk about more about the fake news stuff. But the discussion is really difficult to have, because that there is no ultimate authority to say this is real, this is fake. You now have the person who's going to be president claiming the stuff that's obviously fake is real. That's bad. That's bad. I'm still, and we have to keep saying that's bad. So this might be my weekly "That's Bad" show, which we'll do too. What are we doing on time? Yeah, going long as hell tonight. So fine, I guess. I don't know. People are still watching. I don't know if I should keep talking and just finishing this stuff, or try and condense it and edit it down. I don't know. Somebody tell me. But I do appreciate the feedback I have gotten, which has been fun. There was the one thing that I wanted to talk about that I'm not going to get to, I think, tonight, and I guess I'll save it. We'll do a Wednesday show and focus on automation and alienation, and some of the better answers that I think we need to do, like UBI. We'll see if anybody can guess what UBI is. You get 2 points. 2 points if you guess what UBI is before Wednesday, if you make it to this far. Oh, and then finally, we're going to end on something really cool. And I think it's time to end. It's been like 40 minutes. And I keep burping. And people aren't making fun of me, I guess. But anyway, the M drive. And this is more physics fun. For those of you who don't know, I was a big physics nerd when I was a kid, and started reading books about quarks when I was a teenager, and wanted to study physics, and then got to college and did some different things. But I've always been very interested in this stuff and continue to follow the research and whatnot. So the M drive is this notion that you can create thrust through basically electromagnetic pulses, microwave radiation, and they don't know exactly how it works. So they have this cone-shaped thing, and they essentially fire it up with electricity. There's no fuel, and then that generates a thrust out of it. And the idea being like, well, hold on, we just generated this thrust without having a fuel, which for space travel is really good, because then you don't have to carry fuel. You just need energy, which you can get from stars and stuff. So there's a couple discussions, and I've got a link. I'm going to throw this up in the official write-up, which will go on Escaping Dystopia. Everything goes up on the website. there, all the links and stuff. But there's kind of speculation on how it works, and it's really kind of neat because I think that it's what's I couldn't even really go into it, but I think the discussion has to do with the shape is what matters. And so you're firing up kind of the background radiation of, so man, how can I even go into this without having to do like silly talk for 5 minutes to set it up? I'll have to work on that. But read up on the M drive. We're learning some weird things on the edges of physics, and I think there's stuff that we don't know, and this is one of those things that I think is kind of similar to, earning that, if you fly a thing and you have a plane on this side and the air goes slower here and faster up here, then you'll have an air pressure difference which creates lift, which is how planes work. And this is not something that our species really used a whole lot more than a couple hundred years ago, right? And so the idea here is that you fire up this in this particular space, you send a bunch of magnetic or microwave radiation in here, and the only way that it can rebalance itself basically into the quantum foam is by expelling a little bit of stuff this way because you have it blocked every other direction. And so you energize this, and then it has to come out this way, which creates a thrust. So there's really cool stuff happening. Go read up on this M drive thing. And the reason I'm talking about this, and there's always weird physics stuff out there, weird, crazy physics stuff that people are talking about. Again, our media universe, nobody knows what's bullshit, nobody knows what's good. So I had another project I was going to do years ago to try and fix that, but I didn't ever get to it. I have it whole sketched out in one of my notebooks. But check out that M drive stuff. The only reason I'm saying this, NASA published a paper that they actually measured the thrust that was generated. The Ars Technica article is neat because it actually says there might be like a total... One of the things that they noticed when reading it was even as they cranked up the amount of microwave radiation that they pumped in here, the thrust stayed the same, which makes sense to me because then you can't fire up this background radiation and make it balance out more than you could normally. It's going to be a constant rate, right? You're dealing with, but you can do it 1,000 times at once. So all in parallel. So pretty neat stuff on that. So I definitely want to save the species because I think we can go and explore the stars now, at least one of these other ways. But we do have to save this planet first. And it's getting weird here. So we'll talk about that more next week. Thanks everyone who made it all the way through. That was a long one. Yeah, the M drive, the Ars Technica one. I'll put it up. I'll throw up another one on it. It's neat stuff. It's speculative physics, but anyway. So thanks everyone. The world hasn't ended yet, so that's good. I'll see you next week. I'm going to come back Wednesday and do a full-on automation because I wanted to talk about it tonight, but I got off on the other thing a little bit, and so I can't focus on it. That's going to be the first thing because robots are. Doesn't take as many people to build robots as the robots can do jobs. I'll say that so far. Even if we build the robots. It's not going to be enough. All right, sorry. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it next time. All right, thanks, everyone. Have a great night. I guess I can go watch the football game because I'm sure it's not halftime anymore. Oops. Thank you. Good night, everyone. I said good night.